Good morning. Welcome to another Talk conversation. Also, let me take this opportunity to celebrate all of my sisters all around the world as we recognize this month as Women International History Month. This is going to be a busy season. The spring has just sprung. I mean, it just came out of nowhere and just sprung upon us. And then at the end of the month, we're going to celebrate what we call Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. And so I just pray that as we move and evolve through this month, through this season, that you see yourself as being free. That's going to be our conversation this morning is how do we, if you will, enjoy the freedom that Jesus has given us? How do we celebrate the freedom that lives within us? And so if you go to the book of Galatians chapter 5, verse 1, that's where we're going to be coming from. But let me ask you this question. Well, let me make this statement to you. Maybe you can agree with me that there are no free rides in this life. And let me tell you why. Most of you have been given the devil a free ride most of your life. That's what you've been doing. Let me say it again. There are no free rides in this life because most of you have been given the devil a free ride most of your life. Jesus came. Jesus wants you to be free. So this morning, don't let the devil ride you. Stop letting him rule and reign over you. Don't let the devil ride you anymore. Okay? Because some of you are going to say, well, he ain't riding me. Well, okay. Well, not anymore. I hope he's not riding you anymore, especially if you're a believer. But there's no free rides in life. Even as believers in Jesus Christ, Apostle Paul tells us to confess with our mouth and to believe in our heart that Jesus is Lord and that God the Father has raised him from the dead. Now, just making that statement, that's not free because you have to do something to receive something. Jesus wants us to be free from bondage. He wants us to be free from being, if you will, incarcerated within this own body, if you will, this fleshly body. He wants us to be free from the slavery of sin. That's what he wants us to be. So this conversation is a conversation that we find ourselves between the law, if you will, and grace. You remember when Paul told the Galatians, when he's talking to his disciples and the people and the clergy, if you will, Paul is telling them, you can go get circumcised if you want to, but you don't have to anymore. You see, some people hold on to tradition. Some people are trying to move forward, but there's others who are trying to drag them back to their tradition. What was good for then doesn't mean it's good for now. And so be careful calling somebody a name because of what you believe in that's coming from the Old Testament. And when we're over living what we call the New Testament, and don't get me wrong, it's all the holy word of God. And so it's all applicable. But some of you have really tried to bound people to a tradition versus listening to what Jesus is saying. So listen to what Apostle Paul is saying in Galatians chapter 5, verse 1. But remember this, there are no free rides in life. And for most of you, you've been in the devil ride you most of your life. Galatians chapter 5, verse 1 says this, stand fast, therefore, in the liberty, the freedom, wherewith Christ has made us free. And be not entangled again with the yoke of bondage. Let me break this down just a little bit more. Paul is saying, live as people who are free, because that's what Jesus has done for you. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover-up for evil. See, that's what some of you are doing. But living as a servant of God. Let me say it again. Live as people who are free. That's what we should be doing. We should be enjoying every moment of that. But not using our freedom, here we go, as a cover-up for evil. That's where we find ourselves, if you will, entangled in. But living as servants of God. Let me put this together like this. Live as people who are free, living as servants of God. But you can't leave out that middle piece because here comes the bondage. I mean, come on, we're all familiar with this one. Men in church just for skirts, allowing evil to cover you, not being a servant, using freedom for your own vices. We're used to that game. So let me ask you this question. Are you a servant of God this morning? Or are you a cover-up saint? Let me say it again. Are you a servant of God this morning? Or is it possible that you're a cover-up saint? The book of Galatians reminds me of the proverb, it's hard to kick against the prick. Anyone who made a living in agriculture using ox goad, G-O-A-D, which was a stick with a point on it. It's like a dart on the end, on the tip of a stick. And the farmers would use this tool to stick the ox to keep him going in the right direction. If the ox was trying to go left, the farmer would stick him with this prod, this goad, and he turned back real fast because the stick hurt. A lot of our children are going in the wrong direction, and we're trying to stick them with words, and we're trying to, if you will, make them feel bad about themselves. So we use certain language and we say certain things, and it's not working. It's not like that stick with a little point on it. I mean, we think it is, but it's not working. Every once in a while, the ox would rebel, and he would kick out, or he tried to back up on the farmer, and the farmer would stick him even harder. And so it's amazing. But when you rebel, you suffer even more. Now, that's you and I as well. Jesus is trying to keep us on what we call the straight and narrow, but we have this nature within us, this sinful nature, to always fight against what's right. Have you noticed how people try to make wrong right more than they should? It's like, just give in. I mean, you're just wrong. You're dead wrong. Just give in. Jesus asked Paul the question, he asked Saul the question, who will become Paul on the road to Damascus. He says, why persecuted me? He says, it's hard to kick against the prick. He says, you're fighting a losing battle. That's what you're doing. Most of you are fighting a losing battle. Most of you team up with the devil on behalf of someone else that you're jealous of or you're envious of. I mean, that's a sad statement to make, but some of you have. And some of you realize you have. Some of you don't believe that you can be free. Therefore, you're not free. So you fight. Watch this. You fight for your children to be free, but they can't be what you refuse to become. Let me say it again. Some of you don't believe that you can be free. Therefore, you're not free. But you fight for your children to be free. You want them to be better than you. You want them to have more than you. But they can't be what you refuse to become. It starts with you. You know, the old proverb, the old adage, I think it's in Proverbs 13 and 24, where it says, spare the rod and spoil the child. Those who spare the rod, we're told, hate their children. Isn't that something? But those who love their children are diligent to discipline them. And that's what we should be. There's a fine line between loving and hating. And you've got to be careful which side you waver on the most. You see, freedom is what we should be striving for. Freedom can be something totally different to each one of us. It depends on how we look at it, what we're needing at that time in our lives. Freedom for some people is the ability to do things that you want to do. I just want to be free to do some things I want to do. You've heard that statement before. I just want to just live a little bit. Well, then live. I mean, freedom is, for some people, is the absence of limitations. I don't want to be blocked in. I mean, my boss got me blocked in. I can't move in the office. He won't let me get promoted because he's always hiding me in the trenches. See, some people don't want any limitations. They don't want no factors to overcome. They don't want any judgment. And that's a beautiful thing if you can find that. But freedom for some is to be free from negative thoughts. Just me, myself, and I just don't want to think these negative thoughts anymore. Can you free me from me, from myself? For some people, freedom is the ability to let go of a toxic relationship. I mean, there's no added value with this individual. That's freedom. If you can do that, some people can't. You hold on. Let me tell you something about freedom. There is no, if you will, better example, or there's no one who resembles freedom better than Harriet Tubman. Now, we know her as the conductor of the Underground Railroad, and she's revered as an American hero, but you have to just understand the story in its entirety. When Miss Tubman emancipated herself, that's what she did. She emancipated herself. Think about what she must have felt like for the first time being free, not being chased, not being called out of her name, more than likely, not being looked down upon. But just think for the first time she breathed what I would call the air for the first time. She was breathing freedom. How that must have smelled. How that must have tasted. You'd have to slow that down and understand. She on her knees, probably touching the ground, the soil. For the first time she could put her hands in soil that she didn't have to work by the sweat of her brow. She didn't have to hear dogs chasing her and people trying to beat her because she was a different color than them. I mean, just think how that must have just felt. Just to free your mind, not to be in bondage, that you're not going to be chased, that you don't have to fear for your life like every second. What a blessing that must have been for her, for Miss Tubman. I mean, that just has to be liberating. I want you to just feel that. I want you to taste that because you have that. You and I, we have that. We really do. We have that. We're no slaves to anyone. Well, we'll talk about that, which you might be a slave to on your own, but she was free from all of that. And so she went back several times to the South to free other slaves. A beautiful thing. Here she is free, but she's still serving. No, she got herself free, but she's still coming back to bring others because you know how it is when you go out somewhere at a restaurant and you eat something that's just so good. And so you call your friend up or you call your wife and you say, we got to come try this together. This is awesome. I mean, you want someone else to try what you just received yourself. And that's what she wanted. She wanted everyone who was in slavery. She wanted them also to feel this freedom, if you will, to taste this freedom. And so she had to go back. She had to go back to make sure that they could have the same pleasure that she just felt herself. See, that's being a servant. That's allowing yourself to be free and then to live as a servant for God, to free others. Not to be selfish, but to be free. Have you ever tasted freedom for yourself? Some of us was raised in such a way that we don't even know how to taste freedom. We're so much in trying to do everything for everyone else that we can't even just settle down for a second to just enjoy the freedom that we have within ourselves. Some of us can't. And that's where the little piece comes in. Live as people who are free, not using your freedom as a cover up for evil. Here you go. But living as servants of God. Some of you are living, yes, some of you are living this thing up under that evil covering. As we go further down in Galatians chapter 5, verse 13 to 26, just come down a few verses. Your flesh is always trying to enslave you to obey it. That's your flesh. That's its job. It wants you to serve it. But at the same time, your spirit is trying to free you, yes, from the bondage of sin. Verse 13 reads like this, as Paul is talking to us. You, my brothers and sisters, were called, were chosen, were selected to be free. But do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Don't cover up, yeah, under this freedom for evil, yeah, doings. He says, don't indulge the flesh. He says, rather serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is fulfilled in keeping this one command, love your neighbor as yourself. Do you realize you can wrap all the commands up upon this one command? Love your neighbor as yourself, especially when it comes to you and I, horizontally, loving one another. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. Verse 16. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. It's a war going on. It's a battle going on. Which one are you allowing to win on the inside of you? They are in conflict with each other, so that you are not to do whatever you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you're not under the law. You're under grace. Verse 19, the acts of the flesh are obvious. Sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery, idolatry, and witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, fits of rage, selfish ambition, dissensions, factions, and envy, drunkenness, orgies, and the like. I warn you, as I did before, that those who live like this will not inherit the kingdom of God. Don't let your flesh sell you out. I told you, you've been giving the devil a ride most of your life. Verse 22, But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Against such things, there is no law. Those who belong to Jesus Christ have crucified the flesh. Have you crucified your flesh this morning with its passions and desires? That's a tough thing to do, but have you done it? Since we live by the Spirit, let us keep in step with the Spirit. Let us not become conceited, provoking, and envying each other. Most of you are hiding behind the word freedom. Most of you are covering up, or covering under, if you will, the freedom of your free will, so that you can sin as you please and not feel bad about it. That's what most of you are doing. So as we all live in this world, we have to ask ourselves the question, what happened to our value system? Or what did we let happen to our value system? We live in a world where being ratchet is adorned. Being naked in the streets is praised, is saluted. Yes. But being feminine, oh, come on. As a woman, phew, that's a sign of weakness now. And then being masculine as a man, you got to be kidding me. That's been defunded. Oh, haven't you heard? I mean, that's been defunded. You see, we've lost our way. I mean, that's what's taking place. Everybody is fighting to go against the grain. Everybody is fighting. Everyone's trying to make wrong right. I can't say it enough. It's hard to kick against the prince. That's what the Lord is telling us this morning. It is hard to kick against the prince. He's got to set up rules, standards, commands, if you will. And to kick up against them, all you're doing is suffering. And the more you kick, the more you suffer. So when do we stop trying to make wrong right? Everything God told women to be, women no longer have a desire to be. And everything God told men to be, men no longer have a passion to become. So the question on the table this morning is to be or not to be. What are you trying to be or become? Because we're finding ourselves between a rock and a hard place. So if you look at the landscape, we're living in a time, in a season where women have a lot more control, a lot more power, a lot more say-so, if you will. So women, my sister, what are you planning to do with all that power, all that control, all that say-so that you're possessing? Are you planning to get even with men, or are you planning to get more righteous with God? I want you to keep this in mind. Whom much is given, much is required. If you're not careful, they always make the statement, there's nothing new under the sun. You'll repeat history versus improving it. So be very careful. Freedom is reminding yourself of your successes instead of your failures. The devil wants to remind you of all your failures. But Jesus Christ came to free you, to focus on your successes. Everything between your ears, yeah, what they say, it's 5 inches between your ears. See, that's free. Everything, your thoughts, all that's free. Your imagination, all that's free. Writing is free. Just look at all the things that are free. Laughing is free. Meditation is free. Walking, hiking, running, biking, all that's free. Singing is free. Being innovative and creative, that's all free. But are you incarcerating yourself this morning? Are you living under bondage because you're giving the devil, you're letting him drive you, you're letting him ride you? Is that where you're trapped in between? We've got people incarcerated who makes a statement, I might be incarcerated physically, but mentally, I'm free. I'm free in my mind. I'm free with my mentality. In a sense, when you think about it, everything is free. But in another sense, really nothing is free. Don't let the devil ride you. I can't say it enough. Don't let him ride you. Financially, your girlfriend purchased a brand new car. You don't need a car. But you went and purchased a car because your girlfriend purchased a car. But you didn't purchase a car. She purchased a car because she needed a car. You purchased more debt. You purchased more abundance. That's what you did. Trying to live up with the Joneses. No, you're living more in debt. And that's what we do. We go out and get ourselves into so much bondage because of what we see someone else have. Your girls are all married until you want to be married. And you just go get married. Now you got yourself in debt, and you got yourself with a booger that you don't want because guess what? Because you allow the devil to ride you. And so he's all inside of your mind. Mentally, you need to be free. But you allow the devil to ride you in all your decisions. So you're not free mentally. You're not free financially. You're not free mentally. And we can talk about finances, but you can run that trap yourself. You know exactly what you've done to be in bondage, to be in debt. You wouldn't buy a house because someone else bought a house. So now you're, watch this, they need that house, but now you just got debt. You bought debt. Look at it from that perspective from now on. You purchased debt, is what you did. Physically, this flesh has you trapped. It has most of us trapped. This flesh, I'm telling you, it's a beast. If you're not careful, yes, it will run your life. It will ruin your life. Paul tells us, live as people who are free, living as servants of God. When was the last time you served someone else? I remember when I was young, my favorite ride was the roller coaster. And I'd save up all year long. So when the carnival came to town or the circus came to town, they'd always have the roller coaster. And I always have my money to go ride the roller coaster because I wanted to ride it because nothing was free, even for kids. You take a cruise, that's not free. You got to pay. You take a flight, that's not free. You go and visit a resort, that's not free. Nothing is free. You ride the city bus, you got to pay. I mean, you call Uber, Lyft, you got to pay. And most of the time, you got to pay in advance. I took my family to Disney World, and I've been to Disneyland, Six Flags. I mean, all that stuff. You think about it, and not one time have we gotten in free. As a matter of fact, when I took them to Disney World, we had to pay to enter the parking lot. I mean, you got to pay to just get into the place. And then to get into where all the attractions are, you had to pay quite a bit, by the way. You had to pay quite a bit. I call entering the parking lot, it's like a dating a woman. It's the promise ring. And then I call getting in behind the gates where all the attractions are. I call that the engagement ring. And that's where we are. Because nothing's free. And then I call getting on the rides. And if you know anything about Disney World, there's some long lines. I mean, some long lines. And so in order to get up to propose to her, if you will, to get on that ride, they have something called the fast pass. You can kind of go around all the other suitors who are trying to court, if you will. This young lady you're trying to court. And so I call that really getting up to the part where it's the wedding, to where you're able to pay and you're able to get on the ride. You're able to call her yours, if you will. That's where we are. We're living in a time where nothing is free. And I want you to understand that if you're going to, this is a good one for you. If you're going to fornicate, realize there's a price to be paid for that. If you're going to commit adultery, realize there's a price to pay for that. Because really, when you start fornicating, when you start committing adultery, you take your freedom away. You allow the devil to ride you. At that point, the Holy Spirit's not riding you. You've allowed someone else to ride you. I'm just trying to get you to where you know that nobody, I realize this in their right mind, would intentionally give the devil a ride. But we're doing things and we're acting like everything is just fine in this world full of sin. And it's not. I don't think that most of you understand how important you are. In the book of 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 16, I think Paul says it so well. He says, know ye not that ye are the temple of God, and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. You are the temple, and the Spirit dwelleth in you. If any man defile the temple of God, him shall God destroy. For the temple of God is holy. Which temple are you? You are holy. God dwells on the inside of you because you're holy. But if you're not going to be holy, then God's going to destroy you. I told you, there are no free rides. Women, you have what I call the Disney World adventure power. You have that package, if you will. Listen to me. Don't allow anyone into your Disney World adventure until they place a ring on your finger and marry you. No one. I mean, what company do you know that will allow you to ride, if you will, try their merchandise out before you buy it? Where do they do that at? They don't do that nowhere. You've got to purchase that stuff. Don't allow no one, I'm telling you, let no one enjoy your Disney World adventure until they put a ring on it. I can't say that enough. Live as people who are free, not using freedom as a cover-up of evil. That's what some believers do to other believers. They're living up under that, yes, that banner that I'm saved too. I mean, it's going to be okay. We can do this. No, it's not going to be okay. Because if they were really, truly going to bless you, they'd be living as servants of God. That's what Paul tells us. As believers, we are the temple of God, and the Spirit of God dwells within us. Paul showed us that we are being pitted against one another. When you look at it, the whole book of Galatians is talking about the spirit versus the flesh. That's what it's talking about. It's talking about the law versus the promise versus faith. It's talking about tradition versus Jesus. It's talking about servants to sons to heir, to join earth with Jesus Christ. It's talking about bondage to freedom. Are you a child of the flesh or are you a child of the promise? Let me say it again. Are you a child of the flesh or a child of the promise? We've all saturated ourselves in this world, and we've oversaturated ourselves in this world, if you will, with their gods. I mean, let's just be honest. Versus believers being on one accord, and we're oversaturating this world with the only true living God. That's what we should be. We shouldn't be indulging in being oversaturated in their stuff. We should oversaturate them in our stuff. We're playing what I call catch up because there are just few laborers in the field, because the laborers are participating in the harvest of the world. Let me just make this statement to you. There's no free rides in this life. And for most of us, my brothers, most of us have been allowing the devil to ride us. So my statement to my sisters as I close, my sisters, don't give him the best of you if he can't afford the rest of you. Don't forget Romans 10:9. Confess with your mouth and believe in your heart that Jesus Christ is Lord, and that God has raised him from the dead, and you too shall be saved. And remember this, God is God. You be blessed.